Hi, I'm Karen Alari, and today we're going to be painting this little 8x10 acrylic painting, Hillside Stream. I'll put all the information about the materials you'll need down in the information box below the video. So first I'm going to start by doing a little bit of drawing just to get my general roadmap going for what I'm going to do. Doesn't matter what color you use for this. But I'm going to tilt this up just a little bit because I'm getting a lot of glare, and if it's too hard for you to see, we'll go back to it. But I want this is mostly about this hillside. So I want the hillside to be somewhere around in here, maybe a little lower. Maybe around in here. That gives me one. It's about in thirds. This one's, I think, that's about thirds. Okay, so that's going to be the hillside. Then I've got a mountain coming up here, going down here and back up here. We've got those trees we'll put over the top. And then coming down here, about on the thirds, we'll have our little meandering mountain stream that's coming down this hill. And it comes over to about here, down at the bottom. We get this real quickly diminishing, vanishing point there. So we get some sense of perspective. Though it's interesting because we're not trying to get the perspective of this being a horizontal going back. It's a hill coming down. So that gives us something kind of different to work with here. Should be fun. All right, so now I'm just going to block in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a yellow down here where I just put red. And then I'm going to move up to a peachy color, pinky color. And I'm going to do it much brighter. So this is the new, sort of newer to me technique I've been working with. And that's to use quite a bit brighter colors on the block end than I'm going to have in my finished painting. And then I'll come in with some warmer colors. Actually, I'm not going to use the orange on that. I'm just going to go straight into the red and then let those blend themselves. Yeah, so I'm starting with a strong block in of rich colors, chromatic colors, and then when I come over the top with my more muted colors, I'm going to get some, hopefully, a little bit of vibration going on there. Normally I would block in with more like the colors that I would use in the shadow areas of the finished painting, but experimenting here today, so you get the benefit of watching me crash and burn too if this totally doesn't work. But that's what painting's about, right? It's about experimenting. So never be afraid to experiment. So I'm just going into my yellow here, and again adding some white to it, lighten it up a little bit so I get a color that I can blend together with that pink. I added a little bit of water to my brush there. That makes your blending a little bit easier. So this next area is going to be the blue of the mountains in here, and I don't really need to make that area pop, but I think I will do it possibly a little bit purpler. Oh, let's use some dioxazine. A little bit more to the purple than the finished painting is going to be. So you see, I'm kind of analyzing each area and then deciding what the finished painting is going to be, and then going a little more chromatic with the color so that I can then come back over the top with the more neutral colors. Remember, this is the block end, so this isn't the final colors of the painting. I see all these little white sparkles coming up. This is why I tone my canvas first, usually. I just didn't today. because you end up spending a lot of time making sure the paint gets into all the crevices of the canvas, and so you don't get these little white sparkles, but that's okay. Here's a lesson in colors. See where this orange is meeting that yellow there. It's mixing a little bit, and that's turning into a real gray color because those are complementary colors, and complementary colors will give you a neutral. So when you're doing things like this where you want a gradation, though here I don't want a gradation, but if you did want it to be more of a gradation like in the sky, you have to be careful to do a buffering color between complementary colors. But that's another painting. I digress. So I will just keep on painting. So this is those background mountains, and they are going to get much more neutral, but I want to cover the canvas with my block in stage. I probably should have used a bigger brush. Okay, there's that. Now I'm going to go into the greens, and one thing you'll notice with these greens is they're going from a blue-green up here, kind of a misty blue-green up here. Everything is very soft, and then they're transitioning into warmer and warmer greens as we get towards the bottom here. And I'm also getting more edges, so crisper brush strokes as I move down to the bottom. And then I've got this little stream and a few rocks thrown in there. So we'll have that too. But what we want to do is block in that gradation from blue-green to yellow-green. So I think I'm going to look around for my bigger brush real quick. It's easier to use a bigger brush when you're doing your block in. I could even probably go a little bigger than the one I'm using, but a nice flat brush that's a little bit on the big side will just help you cover the canvas more quickly and more easily. I use some of my Pthalo Turquoise there that I have on the palette. You could also just use Pthalo Blue, maybe add a little bit of yellow to it if you don't have turquoise going on. And I'm just brushing that in and filling up the space. Your goal here with the block in is to cover all those little white sparkles of the canvas. Just cover that white canvas so it doesn't show through, and you get a nice starting layer of paint to work from. When I'm working with acrylics, I always do lots of layers, and the first layer is going to really soak into the canvas, so the subsequent layers will be easier and easier to apply once you get past this first layer that you have going on. So I'm just working down the canvas. You can add a little bit of water to your paint at this stage just to get it to cover easier and faster. Okay, so I've got a very blue-green color going on there, and then I'm going to switch to a yellow-green color. And like I always say, when you're mixing light colors that are predominantly yellow, like yellow-green, always start with your lighter colors and then add your darker colors, especially when you're working with phthalo blue, which is what this is. Phthalo is a very, very strong staining color, and it can really be a bully and take over whatever mixture you're using real quickly. So it's important to start with the yellow and add the blue to it in tiny little amounts until you get to where you want to be. Another thing about yellow, when you're working with yellow, it's always a fine balance between getting enough brightness to the yellow and getting it to cover, because it tends not to cover very well. So you really need to keep an eye on that by, oh sorry, see, I can't talk when I start painting. It's a different part of the brain. it if you don't add a little bit of white to yellow, it's going to stay too transparent and it's not going to cover, which can be really frustrating. But you don't want to add so much white that you lose the chroma of the color, the vividness of the color. So it's just kind of a dance when working with yellow to keep it bright but get it to cover. The other way to do it is just to let it dry and come back in many layers and do it that way, but I don't have the patience for that. Okay, so coming up further, I'm going to go even a little bit greener. Don't you like my new palette paper? It's this gray. I was having a lot of trouble with the white ones because the camera would see that white and then it would adjust the whole image to the brightness of that white. So I had the thought to try this gray palette paper and I think it's working really well. Okay, so a little bit greener, we got that going on. I've got gradation. I think I'm going to move this gradation up a little bit. All right, so this is going to be a little stream. I'm using ultramarine blue and phthalo blue there. Coming down. Again, this is much brighter than I will have the finished color, but I just want to get something in there. And this is not all. This is just going to be a little bit of water. Sorry, I'm covering that up. I really need to bring that green in further. That whole swath is for the lighter green and the more textured area there. So I'm going to bring in more green. Too much phthalo. Phthalo takes over. The thing with color mixing is you can always adjust it. So I got a little too much phthalo blue in there, but I'm just adding more yellow back in and some white. Looking for a medium tone green, a medium value, and a medium tone just to fill in this area around the stream where I made it a little bit too wide. We still want that feeling of that shape diminishing into the distance, but it's not going to be all stream. It's also going to be partly different colors of green and more interesting shapes in the foliage there within that shape. So with the blocking, usually what we're focusing on is the values more than anything, more than color. In this case, I am focusing a little bit on values, but these are obviously not what the finished values are going to be. So I'm kind of switching it up. It's almost, I would say it's almost like what this is the toning of the canvas even more than the blocking, but I am getting the shapes that I want. I'm just not getting the values or the colors. Okay, all the white of the canvas is covered. So I'm going to work up a sky color and I'm going to go with a light blue, but it's going to be a neutralized blue. I want that, like in the original, sort of that feeling of a morning sky, but very misty. So working with blue in order to neutralize blue, of course, I'm going to add a tiny bit of its complement, which is orange. Just a tiny bit, and that was more than a tiny bit, but that's okay, I can come back. And of course, always have to check your colors on your painting. You can't tell by what's going on your palette. Something about putting those colors up against the colors on your painting makes a big difference. So always check against your painting. Let's see if I'm getting that light enough. I think so. Now what I'm going to try to do is do this really quickly and very lightly. And I'm even going to add a little bit of water. I just rinsed my brush and patted it dry a little bit. So my goal here is to neutralize this down a little bit and cover up some of that color, but have it peek through and have it affect the final colors. So you notice when I went down into the yellow, I also picked up a little more white to make it a little bit lighter, closer to the horizon, because you always are a little bit lighter closer to the horizon. So I'm keeping, there's a little more water than I would normally use, and I'm definitely brushing more than I normally would brush. I'd normally just lay down a brush stroke and leave it alone, or at least try to. But I want just a smooth kind of milky layer over the top of this. Cover up that color, but have it kind of still influence the sky. That's kind of interesting. We'll let that dry and see how that comes out. All right, I'm going to move on to the mountains. And again, I'm going to use a light blue, but this time I'm going to purple it up just a tad. I'm going to warm it up, and instead of using my tube purple, which is very purple, I'm just going to add a little bit of this alizarin crimson to give it some warmth. Got to get that paint out of the ferrule of the brush, because it'll always seem to, you'll do a brush stroke and then something that's stuck up there will come down and be an entirely different color. Let's see, that's about the same color as the sky. Not dark enough. Bring in some more blue. So let's see what I can do and still have the benefit of a little bit of this purple picking through. I don't want it along the top edge though. I don't want a dark line there, because that would be too harsh. So I like to keep a nice soft line in the distance. Maybe down here I'll get a little looser with my brush strokes and let some of that purple kick through. I think it does influence it, even if it doesn't show through. I might let some of it show through down here. See if this is dry. Not quite. I think as it's drying, it's coming through a little too strongly. I think I'm going to do another layer of that milky stuff over the top of it. All right, so I'm not going to fuss too much with this mountains, because they're going to be behind the trees and they won't be showing up much. So I'm not going to fuss with that too much, but like that. And I got it further down than I have. It's always when you're changing from one size to another, you got to adjust your thinking. Okay, I think down at the bottom. So these mountains, actually, these mountains are just back behind. There's like a peak of a hill here, and it goes down again. You can see the little tips of the trees down lower. So I don't want to, I was thinking of bringing in a little bit of green at the base, but I don't want that. I actually want this all to just stay way in the distance and just have no features really at all. It's just something really in the background. I just want to go ahead with the trees now. So I'm going to use blue. I'm going to use some Pthalo blue. And I'm going to put some of this red in it to neutralize it. And I'm going to put some white over on the edge of it. See what color I get. See, that's interesting with that Pthalo blue and the red. Okay, that's an interesting color. If you put cadmium red into Pthalo blue, you get a real turquoisey color, which is kind of interesting. So I want this to be a little bit greener. So I'm going to add some of my Indian yellow, and I use Indian yellow when I want something a little more neutral, not too chromatic. And those trees back there are lighter and bluer and grayer because they're in the distance, and we want to get that that atmospheric perspective going on. And I'm going to try some of this. This is still a little bit wet. I've switched to my smaller brush, and I'm just putting in some shapes here. And because that's still a little bit wet, it's blending in, which I'm liking right now, because I want that to be real neutral looking in the distance, real soft. Sorry, soft is the word. Words do get away from me. Okay, I needed more of that color, which was Phthalo blue, Hansa, Napthol red, and Indian yellow. It's a very grayish green, very gray green. In fact, well, let's see. Yeah, see, it is pretty green. Let's add a little tiny bit more blue to it. I like that more blue-green color. Let's see. Yeah, okay. I kind of did that one over there because I'm probably going to cover it up with another tree, so I wanted to get some experimenting going on. So well, I want these to stay really loose, and that's too dark. I want them to stay really loose and sketchy and soft. I'm barely touching the canvas, and I'm trying to get a sort of organic looking shape. I don't think I came down far enough in that one. Oh well. You know, every painting's going to be a little bit different. So it's good to have a reference to give you ideas, especially when you get stuck. But once you're going, you really got to let the painting speak for itself. And put some white in there. It's looking a little dark to me. Okay, so took advantage of that being a little bit lighter and to give a little bit more form to these trees. The light and the dark will give that form. So really lightly and loosely adding in some tree shapes here. These trees are down below the crest of this hill, so we're not seeing the whole tree. They're just peeking up. Probably won't show up over here much, but let's see, I think I want to do a little tiny one in here, a little tiny baby tree. I think because this is a little bit bigger of a space, I am going to add a little bit more form to them by getting a little bit of lighter color in there to want these tips to be very loose. I'm not worried about that one because it's going to get covered up. I'm just using the corner of my flat brush. This is about a 3/8 of an inch wide flat. It's actually technically a bright, I think. And all right, so I'm pretty happy with that. I know in this, I know in here, I'm gonna, right in this area, there's gonna be some misty stuff going on in there. And I've also got a little bit of the hill goes up a little bit and then comes back down a little bit. So that's gonna be going on. So I think what I'm gonna do, since I've got this, so I want the hill to come down here a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and bring these trees down. Get my darker color. Down here a little bit more, so that I can have my hill go down if I need to. These are gonna dry a little bit. Okay, let's start doing this. Let's start go into more of a blue-green. And I'm using my mixed ones here. I have a turquoise over there I could use, but that's gonna be very bright, and I don't really want these colors on top to be that bright. So I'm taking my phthalo blue and my Indian yellow and adding a little bit of red, and I'm gonna add a little bit of white. So I want to come in here a little bit brighter than that. Okay, I lied. I'm going to use the turquoise. That's going to brighten that up a little bit. And I just want to get some of this color going on, get the texture. So down here, we'll have this coming up, and then we'll have some trees coming up. We're just going to have some texture going on. And that's just going to set the stage. I'm trying not to cover up all my colorful underpainting, just to have some of it come through. And that's going to be a little bit too dark. So I'm going to add white to that and a little more of my turquoise. See, I'm just creating texture by putting random strokes in there. But this is all in the distance, so we want to keep it pretty soft. All right. Soften it up a little. Whenever you want to blend with acrylics when they're still wet, okay. Some of this. All right. So with that, we're going to start doing some of these green trees that are more in the front. I'm going to start with this. This is a hooker's green, but you could mix this green. Okay, so I'm coming in here with some trees. I want this first layer to be really dark, so I'm going to add, oh, my squirrel is climbing my window. I have this bird feeder on my window, and the squirrels climb up and try to get in it. Well, they don't try, they do get in it. But that goofy squirrel was just climbing up the side of my windowsill. I have a big picture window here in my studio. Goofy thing. All right, so what am I doing? I am putting in some trees, and I'm trying to stay really loose so that I don't. And I'm just thinking about these trees, and I'm just gonna plop them in. I'm using my flat brush, and I'm I'm doing these, I don't know the names of trees, but these kind of evergreen pine-like trees. Some of them's branches go downwards and some go upwards. These particular ones I'm having kind of go downwards. Okay, thinking about these trees, some of them are further away, some of them are closer up. They're going to be smaller if they're further away. I'm just putting in random shapes. I completely covered that tree up. I fed those squirrels this morning too. I don't know why he's getting so frantic over there. All right, before I get too much further and before that paint dries, I'm going to come back in with my turquoisey colors. Let's see, some kind of random color here. So I want to soften up the bottom of this. I'm going to keep this bottom all soft. Okay, so what I was doing there is I just wanted to soften up the bottoms of those, because I want to create a mist down there, kind of a misty color. And normally, so I did mention that these are acrylics, right? I hope so. If you were using oils, I could have gone across all the way and did all the trees and then come back and blended that in, but you can't do that with acrylics. You got to just do small portions and then blend as you go. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just doing half of it and then blending back. And then I'm going to come in with something lighter because that's too dark. And this is still wet for about another 30 seconds or a minute, so I can blend that in a little bit. I think I'll come back here later. Get a little better edge there, but we'll see. The idea is just to blend that out. Then we can come back in. And then back and forth, you know, dark to light, light to dark. So I'm going to bring a little bit of that back in. A touch is something quite darker. So to get something very dark, I'll take that green and add a little red to it. Just some texture, something going on. Who knows what, but there's something going on back there. Random texture. I love random texture. We're going to come in also with some more sort of greeny colors, yellow-green colors, but on those trees to give them some form. You know, if you just do one color, you're going to end up with a flat shape, which is great if you're using, it's like a silhouette or something like that. That's all good, but when you want something to have a little bit of form, then you have to come in with a variety of values and colors in order to create that form. Light, medium, and dark. I always think in my mind, light, medium, dark. I got to make sure I get light, medium, and dark. And that meaning not just the same color, light, medium, and dark, but you also have to shift the color as you go. Yeah, I actually don't think I changed this image up too much from the photograph. I was looking at the photo or looking for the photo to try to have you guys see that too, but I couldn't find it. Lost in the depths of my computer somewhere. Baby, I don't want to overdo these, but I do have more space. I'm noticing I'm getting twos. Two of everything. So, wonderful thing about acrylics is you don't have to worry about the fact that you don't have to worry about messing anything up, because you can come back and just paint over it at any point, which is lovely. Right now I'm making a green that is more of an olive green. So an olive green is a neutralized green, a slightly warm neutralized green. So you see, if you just take that green, I was using, I don't remember what blue I used, but I put Indian yellow in it, and then I added some Napthol red, and that gives you a more neutralized olive green. And that's probably too light, but not neutral enough yet. The thing with acrylics is they dry darker. So if you put it down there and you think, oh, that's too light, then you are probably exactly on the right value. Because as I'm putting this down, I'm thinking that is too light, but I'm going to let it dry and see how it goes. So all I'm doing is I'm putting in a little bit of this. You notice how I am not like, I'm not particularly good at drawing, and I'm not, as a painter, I rely a lot on blobs of paint and the viewer filling in the details. So, and I do a lot of back and forthing. So I put in that back and forthing. That's a technical painting term. Don't laugh. I put in some of that light, and now I'll bring some of this dark back on top of it. Wow, that tree's got an issue on the top. Maybe that's an eagle's nest right there, you think? I don't know. I think it's a mess. That's what it is. So, all right, so that looks better, adding a little bit of green, darker green back in. All right, so I've got this green I'm using. Where am I? Oh, I'm over here with my neutralized yellow green, adding some of that to my other trees. The smaller version, I love doing these little 5x7s like this one is, smaller versions, because you just hardly have just one little brush stroke here and there, and you have all this things going on. And when you're working with a bigger painting, you have to do more brush strokes. You got more paint to cover, and it's really easy to lose this sort of painterly effect when you're painting bigger. So that's why it's super fun to paint on a small canvas with a relatively big brush. I think I did this whole thing with a brush a little bit bigger than this one I'm using that right now. But yeah, it really frees you up and helps you loosen up. when you work with those big brushes. I'm just going straight into my mixed Hooker's green and adding some yet red to it. And I think I'm going to add some ultramarine blue too. The fun thing, something that I always like to do, and I always, when I'm teaching, I like to get everybody to do, is every time you go back to your palette, shift up your color just a little bit. Change your color. Don't always use the same. Maybe mix some colors together. Don't always use the same color. And if you do that, you'll end up with all this variation of color on your painting, which just makes it interesting. Nature's like that, you know. Nature doesn't use the same paintbrush all the way across the scene you're looking at, but things change because the light is different in every little area that you might be in. The light's different, and the plants are different, the vegetation is different. That's looking pretty dark. I don't know if you guys can really see. I'll put it a little closer to see if you can see that. You can see that a little bit better. There's just some little subtle gradations of color in there. I'm not sure what I'm going to do about the eagle's nest over here. I think I'm going to come in and paint around it a little bit with my sky colors, but I'm going to wait until that part dries a little bit more. So let's come down and start doing some fun stuff in here. We got these kind of interesting things going on. I think I'm going to go one lighter, add some of my two colors here. So that was my kind of khaki green, tree green, and then my neutralized aqua green. That's pretty light, but I'm going to go with it. Remember, if it's too light, it's probably right. That's working with acrylics. So I want to do this to just get some little more variety. I always recommend holding your brush like this versus holding it like a pencil, especially if you're having trouble with being too tight with your painting. It helps to loosen up your brush strokes. So now I'm back into my adding texture mode. I'm just picking up all these different weird colors that are on my palette at this point to add texture. And what that means is just putting in different colors and different values, all the time thinking about staying within the values that you created, that you want because of how far away something is. So I know that this is still kind of up in the distance, so I want to keep this in the mid-tone values. I got pretty dark up in these trees, but yeah, every rule's meant to be broken. So let's mix up some more green. I'm going to start with this Indian yellow, and I'm going to add some ultramarine, and that's going to make a pretty muddy green. As you get used to your pigments, you'll realize they all have a very different way of mixing together, a different way of playing with others, I always call it. But ultramarine mixes up really muddy. That's why I always have phthalo blue on my palette as well as ultramarine, because it will mix up muddy, and phthalo mixes up very chromatic and clear. So you can see that was just ultramarine blue and Indian yellow, which are both kind of muddy mixers, and so I didn't have to neutralize that green at all, and I got a very muddy color. So that's something to think about. I'm going to add a little phthalo to that, and that's going to bring that back up a little bit. And bring back up, I mean make it more chromatic, prettier color. Got a lot of water in that. I don't want that much water. I always keep my paper towel in my other hand to wipe off my brush. I want to try to keep some of that underpainting going on. I wanted to keep in the background here, keep these colors pretty blue. So I added some ultramarine there, and add a little more ultramarine. So we get this gradation. Gradations are the key in painting and keeping things interesting. So as you, in any large area like we have here, this is a really large area that we're just going to do some variations of greens. So in any large area, you want to gradate your colors. Don't have the same thing going all the way down, but gradate. It goes along with that picking up a different color every time you go back to your palette, slightly varying it. So we're going to go from these more neutral bluish colors, and then we're going to come back. We're going to go warmer as we come down. So, and we're also going to go more chromatic as we come down. So as we come towards the front and towards the foreground, the greens are going to get more chromatic and prettier. So I think I'm going to start a new pile over here with yellow and some phthalo blue, and that's going to give me some of this brighter green. And all I'm doing, in fact, I'm going to switch back to my bigger brush for a minute because I've got a lot of space to cover here with texture, and I want my brush strokes to stay clean and quick. Let's see, I don't want Alizarin, I want Pthalo. I need a big batch of this. So let's do Pthalo and yellow. And see what happens when you start with Pthalo instead of starting with yellow? Do as I say, not as I do, right? Okay, so let's just get a little bit of this and see where that's going. That's too dark. Let's get some, I want some really pretty green up here. Texturing, I'm texturing. So as I come forward, my brush strokes are getting bigger. Trying to stay very random. And I'm probably going to reshape the path. I want this to really curve back and forth. So I don't want any of this very green up there. I want to keep that more blued and more neutral. Keep that. So coming back to my palette, I'm going to add some more yellow to that. The other thing that I think is the biggest, another thing I see people doing a lot when I'm teaching is not putting enough paint on your brush. And I know these paints can be expensive, and so your tendency is to be really frugal with them. But the goal is to get a nice clean brush stroke on your palette and set it down and leave it down. And you can't do that if you don't have enough paint on your brush. So make sure, especially when you get into these foreground areas that are going to be more textural and have crisper edges and more obvious brush strokes, you want to be able to just put down a brush stroke and leave it. And even there you could see if I don't have enough paint on my brush like this and I put a brush stroke down, it doesn't cover completely, and then I have to come back and brush it a few more times to get a coverage, and you don't want to do that. So put plenty of brush on your palette and put plenty of paint on your palette and plenty of paint on your brush. So I added a little ultramarine to that blue because you see how quickly that ultramarine muddies that green. It went from that to that by just adding ultramarine. So that's something to keep in mind when if you're getting frustrated with your greens that you're mixing and they're getting too dull. It's you need to switch to a phthalo blue, and a lot of people are afraid of phthalo blue because it is so bright and staining. But you just have to show it who's boss, and then you're good, right? You have to use it in small amounts and not be afraid to neutralize when you need to. Okay. So I have so much more space in this one than in the small painting. And I'm going to have to think about something interesting to do, I can tell. Well, first thing I want to do is I want to add some rocks. So I'm going to start with my Alizarin Crimson. Okay, this is my favorite dark. Alizarin Crimson, Phthalo Blue, about not as much, about 1 part Phthalo Blue to 3 parts Crimson, and then I'll add some yellow to it. So whenever you add all 3 of your primaries, right, you're going to get a neutral. And this way you can have this neutral leaning towards this dark leaning one direction or another. So see if I put a little white in this, see if I can get some clean white to see which direction that's. It's leaning towards a kind of a purplish neutral, which is kind of what I tend to do, is have a purplish neutral because I just like that. Okay, so this one's got these rocks here and there, and so I'm going to put some of that in now so I can work around them. And I know I'm going to reshape this to be going a little more like this. And I'm just going to, so I'm just putting down some dark, and this green is still wet, so it's mixing in, but that's okay. We're thinking about, we're on a hill, so we're not going to be looking so much at the sides of the rocks. You know how you normally paint them, you'll be looking at the side, but we're almost going to be looking more at the tops of these rocks. So think about that in terms of their shape. They're going to be kind of more rounded. And I want this to go like this and to come in like this. So look at this idea of where I'm going with this sides of this. A little meandering bit of water trickling down. It's probably only a seasonal kind of a waterway. Only during the snow melt, I think. So when you're working with, I think I'm going to have some really dark big outcropping over here. And vary up those sizes. I don't want everything to be the same. So and remember, when you're in working with distance and darks, as you go back into your distance, everything is going to get lighter and bluer and more neutrals, and that includes your darks. So you don't want to put the same darks way here as you would there. They're going to get lighter as you go back, and that's probably a little bit too light, but that's okay. If it's too light, it's probably right, remember? Yeah. I cracked myself up. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use this lighter color too on some of these rocks to give them some planes. It's super easy to get lost in rocks, but you want to think about where the sun is hitting. And this one's the sun is going to be very, very diffuse. It's just kind of early morning light, and so it's not going to have a real directional light effect on this one. In fact, it's kind of just ambient. So we're working more with the form than anything else. So the upper surfaces of the rocks are going to get lighter. I'm just doing big brush strokes so that I kind of get some edges to these rocks. And like I always do, I'm going to come back and shift up that color a little bit. Added some blue to it. Let's come back in and get some blue colors in some of these rocks. And I always do this. I never like work and finish one whole area and then work on the next area and finish that whole area. I'll tend to work back and forth. So I'm just touching in different colors here, and we'll come back over with our greens and add more things. So dark, medium, and light, right? So this is starting to pick up the paint below because I've got so much on, so I'm not going to be able to do very much more before I move on and let it dry. But I did want to get some light on these back ones. Yeah, that was too light, so it must be about right. Add a little bit medium, break that up. Dark, medium, light, dark, medium, light. And in different areas, that value shift is going to be different. These are, these ones that are kind of halfway in between, I think I'm going to obscure that darkest dark and just leave that darkest dark for the very, very foreground. And then, just before I move on, I'm going to get something even more blue. I always like a little bit of blue in my rocks. I think that makes them interesting. Make that a lighter blue in the background. Lighter blue back there. Too light, must be right. Okay. Right, we're gonna leave those for a bit and let them just be their rocky selves. Okay, I'm gonna do something with this water to get this waterway better defined. So I'm gonna take some blue, ultramarine blue, and I'm gonna muddy it up with a little bit of orange. It's complement. Now I always start, when I do water, I start with a darker version and then come back with some lighter on top of it. So I want this to be, I don't want it to be very blue. The sky is not very blue and the water is always reflecting the sky. So I'm going to make sure it's pretty neutralized. Let's see where I am with that. Okay, a little too purple. So purple is, yellow is a complement of purple. So if I want to neutralize purple, I'm going to add a tiny bit of yellow. And then because this is water, I'm going to go back and add blue. And I'm going to go with my phthalo. And that using the ultramarine is one of the reasons why it was going purple too, because ultramarine is a very warm blue. And that's gone really green. So I'm going to add back in some ultramarine. That's the way color mixing is. You just got to look at it and decide where you're going. Okay, so that's a very neutral gray. And I'm going to add a little more blue because I don't want it to be that neutral. And I'm going to add a little white because it's looking too dark. Let's see what we got. I'm having trouble getting the blue color, so I'm going to add a little phthalo. If you really want to pop in the blue, go with your phthalo. That's going to pop the blue. Let's see. See how up here on the palette it looks pretty blue, but here it looks very neutral gray. So add a little more blue. I gotta add white with that because I've darkened it by adding the blue. Let's see. Isn't that amazing? That still looks really neutral gray, and on the palette it looks very blue. Okay, that's all right. We're going to use that one. So I'm just putting down a base of this kind of meandering little water runoff, and that's not going to be it over there at all, so we'll put green back in there. I want it to widen out at the bottom because perspective, right? And let me put a rock in the middle of this area down here just to give it something to run around. Let's see if I think I want a rock in about here. I'll deal with that later, but just to get the placement, we'll see. That way we can have it, the water like trickling down on both sides, which is always fun. Let's get some of our dark back. Alizarin, Pthalo. That's going to give me a very dark. It's going to be kind of purpley blue, but I'm okay with that. Got this dark, so adding it touches here and there. Let's see, now I've got that, and I'm still not happy with not really seeing any blue there. That's too much. I'm just gonna get crazy and add a little bit of here and there. Maybe this is the North Umpqua. I don't know if you've ever been to the North Umpqua River, but it's very, they call it steelhead blue. It's very aqua color, the water itself. It's gorgeous. It's down outside of Glide, east of Roseburg, where I used to live. All right, so I've got a little bit of that going on, dark colors, medium colors, added a little bit of fun blue in there. I'm gonna I'll do more of this later, but while I'm at it, I'm just going to, deciding if I want to switch brush sizes. I think I do. I'm gonna go back to my smaller brush. While that's still a little bit of wet, I'm going to I added white to that last sort of brighter blue I put in, and just to get some white watered shadows going down. This is really trickling and sliding over things, so there's a lot of, maybe we'll even have a little waterfallish area down here. And again, that's what I love about working with acrylics, is I don't have to do this right the first time. I never do. So I can kind of get some ideas and start seeing what shapes are being formed, and then I can come back. I want this to peek out. Kind of see it peeking out here, and then it comes in here. Ooh, I really want some pinkish, really warm tones in my rocks. So that's red and the yellow, and that's obviously going to be too much. So I'm going to neutralize that with some ultramarine, my lovely muddy color. But I don't know why, just all of a sudden, I think because I got a little bit of pink showing up in these, but I really want to get, it's almost as if maybe I want to bring those sky colors down into the rocks a little bit. So I'm just adding some touches for fun, and I'm going to put some in the water. I just want to integrate that color so that Doesn't really make sense, but that's okay because, you know, life doesn't always make sense. Just going to integrate that. I'm going to lighten it. Lighten it. And then I'm going to put some of it up here too. Wasn't mixed all the way. Oh my gosh, it's too light. It must be right. All right. Yeah, I like that. I'm going to take some of this dark I made, which isn't really very gray. It's actually very blue, but that's okay. Just want to cover some of that up. Ooh, that's kind of a pretty purple. I like that. Okay, it's probably not, painting isn't going to end up as neutral as the other one, but I tried. I love color. Don't tell anybody, it's our secret. Softening that. So whenever you want to soften with acrylics, you can rinse your brush, dry it off. While that's still wet, you have a moment to soften. I'll blend some of these. What I'm doing now is blending a little bit. And these are pretty dry, but what's happening is I've got sort of some dirty painty water on my brush, so that's kind of putting a film over it, and that has a effect of blending as well. Start getting this many layers. This is also why I like to paint in layers with acrylics, because when you start getting really thick paint and a lot of layers, you do start it stays wet a little bit longer. I'm just blending that in there, so I just got a hint of that color going on, just for fun. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that section. I think I'll stay with this smaller brush and start getting back into the texture here. We won't do a lot more with the texture up here because it's just kind of hazy in the distance, but I want to start developing plants and things down here. And I just have a feeling there may be some wildflowers coming in. I can't help it. So let's see. Let's start with some lighter green. There's yellow and blue. I got a lighter green. Well, first I got to work in this area where I changed the path of my stream. Aren't we powerful? Geez, in our painting world, we can just change the path of the waterways. No problem. So what I'm kind of establishing here is that right around the water, I've got this lighter green going on, just to highlight the waterway, really. Added a little more white as I get up higher. I'm gonna add more white. That looks too light, so it must be right. And really I'm just using this not so much as that it makes sense as a sunlight area or anything, but just to bring importance in the eye, bring the eye into the waterway. And all I'm doing is using the corner and the tip of my flat brush and flipping it this way and that way. I kind of flip it over and tapping it in and letting them, as opposed to really painting it on, I think more in terms of letting the painting pull off the paint off my brush, whatever it needs. So, and don't worry, if it's better to lay down those brush strokes and let them be, and then you can come back later and adjust them, as opposed to painting the canvas, petting the canvas. Petting the canvas is when you put down a brush stroke and you go, oh, that's not quite right, and you do this. And then you have you don't have brush strokes anymore, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And it's more fun to be able to see your brush strokes. So even if they're wrong, don't judge them. Okay, that's what it is. Don't judge your brush strokes. That's not your job. You're just putting them in there, and let them be, and then come back and change them if you need to, but let them breathe. Let the brush strokes breathe, and change them later if you need to. Then when we get down here, we're going to have all kinds of fun stuff going on, but right now I want to pay more attention kind of to these in between areas. So as you work, you want to keep your crisp edges and your most interest, your most fussiness down this center part of the waterway. And when you move out to the edges with your brush strokes, you want to just start getting more and more loose and just doing a few things. You don't want as much texture because you want that eye to come in and up to the sky and then come back down through the trees and stay in the middle of your canvas. You don't want it the eye to be drawn off to the edges, and it will be drawn off to the edges if there's a lot of detail. The edges, fussy brush strokes, small shapes, high contrast. If there's a lot of that going on around the edges, it's going to draw your eye there, and you don't necessarily want that to be drawn there. One thing I like is I like how I've got some really warm colors, and this is actually the background coming through on that, but in this case I'm going to go with some of my Indian yellow and add some white to it to give it some opacity because it's a pretty transparent color. You could also be using like a yellow ochre kind of color. Indian yellow is a little more transparent and not quite as muddy as yellow ochre tends to be. You could also, another one of my favorite colors is quinacridone gold, which is a dark yellowish color, and you could just lighten that up with some white. That would be a good one too. I just want some of this warm color in there, sort of as a contrast. And I'm putting in too much, but I'm gonna come back later. This may even end up being, some little yellow flowers. This might be the shadow areas of some little yellow flowers. Ooh, I think it is. I can tell. They're speaking to me. Okay, adding a little bit of this yellow. As I go up, I'm going to add white to it. And it's going to be too light, so it must be right. Sorry, I gotta stop saying that. Yeah, just because there's so much more space on this one than there is on the one I was doing before. It really needs some other level of interest, so it's going to be these yellow flowers. Yellow flowers, purple rocks. Okay, I do that a lot. I'm not sad. All right, so I need some more. So you can see as we're just building up this texture, just blobs of paint in different values, it's starting to look like there's something going on this hill in terms of foliage. I think at this point in the texture, see, do I want to do that yet? What the heck? So I'm gonna switch over to my liner brush. This is a great brush. It's a long, thin brush. that I use a lot for foliage. And I'm going to use it with, I'm going to bring in some dark green first. This is my, and I'm going to add red to it, which neutralizes it, gives me a nice dark color. Let's see what color we got. A little more green. I think I'll add some blue to that. Just gives me a fun dark. You always want, when you're working with acrylics too, you want to keep your dirty brushes in your water. Don't just lay them next to you because they'll dry out. All right, so when you're working with this long thin liner brush, you got to put more water in your paint. That's the only time I add water to my paint. It's almost like ink when you get done. And then I rub the brush back and forth so I get a nice flat edge to it. And then I can put in some random marks. I hold the brush really loosely and I try to be as random as I can. And again, this is that part where you don't have to worry about being really perfect because you can always paint over it. So I want a few of those. I'm doing some dots and some wiggles and some jiggles. It's whatever, to add some texture. And now I'm going to switch that color up. It's really hard to mix with that paintbrush, so I always switch back to my other one. So I'm going to switch over to something a little more green. So I'm taking some yellow and some ultramarine, and again that gives us that neutralish green because ultramarine makes a neutral green. I'm just changing that up, adding some water to it, and seeing if that's going to show up. And let's add some phthalo to that. See what that does. Makes it a little greener. So you can get some sort of things that look more like leaves by poking it in and wiggling it. But again, don't think about, okay, I'm painting a leaf, I'm painting a flower. Just think about getting interesting shapes and varied shapes. I'm going to get some in amongst this flower, this thing here. I'm going to break up some of these really liney ones that I did that I don't like so much. All right, we're getting some texture going on. I'm going to leave that to dry and look back up here to this texture area. Yeah, okay, I want a little more texture in here. It's not quite looking as interesting as I want. I think I'll start with my Hooker's green and just add white to it and see what color I get there. That might be a nice kind of neutral in between green. Ooh, look how gray that looks. Looks green on the palette, doesn't it? Always got to check it on your painting. So I added some yellow to it. It's a little more green. Of course, if you're doing this painting, you may prefer the more neutral colors. And then once you establish those neutral colors, then they'll all be relatively more neutral. It's all about relative color. To break up this line, I don't know what that is there. So that's all I'm doing here is coming back in and adding some texture through the middle. Because it's going to be like hardly any texture, mostly smooth, and then a little more texture with smaller shapes. When I get to these rocks, I do want to settle them back. So if I take my brush and just flick it up, I'm going to get some shapes like things like that. Okay, oh, and then I want to break up my yellows. I want this greener. So I'm going to take some phthalo and some yellow and some white. And that's going to get that greener for me. Well, let's see what that does. That's sort of a minty yellow. Ooh, I like that. So let's do some little shapes around the bottoms to break up these yellows, because the flowers would be very small back here. Some of this green here. I like that minty green. Those little shapes. Don't want to do much towards the edges. All I'm doing is barely touching the canvas and moving my brush quickly. I think that's another thing that's really helpful, is to try to move your brush as quickly as you can. You can always come back, but don't labor over one spot. Just move your brush in quickly, breaking those up. Well, that's kind of fun. Ooh, I really want, down here I'll have some of these really coming over the edge of the water, obscuring it a little bit. We don't want the edge of that water to be too like a big line, you know. And again, when I get towards the front, that's sort of the same idea as, you know, the sides. You don't want a lot of really detailed stuff going on right down here, because that'll bring the eye right off the canvas as well. So we don't really want that. So I'm going to get a lighter neutral color to put a little bit of light back on those rocks. So red, yellow, and blue is going to make a neutral, whichever ones you want to choose. I'm choosing my muddy colors because that's going to muddy up it quicker. Let's see. That's sort of looks on there like a sort of a pinky color, but we'll see what happens when I put it on here. That's good, it's just not light enough. So I just want to get some touches of a little bit lighter these rocks. I don't want to cover up all those other different interesting colors that I put in there, but I want to get some sunlight on these. Probably leave those pretty neutral, because I don't want to draw the eye down to the bottom of the painting. Yeah. I'm going to do some blending on that, because I don't want those brush strokes to be real obvious. So rinsed off my brush, dried it off, and I can blend those edges a little. Being careful not to cover up all my interesting colors I already put down. Just want to scrub off those brush strokes. You can always use your paper towel. Paper towel will, if you use that for blending, it will pick up a little bit too, so you don't. It's important to try to step back from your painting often, because you will often think that it just looks like blobs of paint, but then when you come closer you realize, oh, that's not so bad. Alright, so just these ones that are by the water, I'm going to bring in a little more. And also something called reflected light, which is so much fun and so confusing. But you know, light comes down and it bounces all over the place on your canvas, or on the world. And I'm putting some touches of some brighter blue in here in the water. It's for fun. For fun and to bring the eye, to draw the eye, right? So what draws the eye is contrast, chroma, sharp edges. All those things draw the eye. And this water is just so, you know, it's gurgling and jumping and coming down this this hill. It's going to have lots of white water and be very disturbed. Anyway, what I was trying to do there was say, I want to keep it dark, but the sunlight's going to be reflecting up off of that water and into the rocks. So you'll get these little bits of blue just right there where it's wet and it's hitting the rock. And the water bounces, the light bounces off the water and up into the rock. Like that. So I want to come in now with, we're closing in on this one. I have stuff to fix the eagle's nest up there. But I want to add those, I want to make those yellow flowers more yellow. So I'm going to take some white and some yellow, and that's going to give me a very bright yellow to put on top of these. So I'm not thinking petals or anything like that with these. I'm just doing adding some yellow, dark, medium, and light. So there's groups of these flowers. They're not individual flowers, but they're in groupings, and that's important to do. And just wherever I have this darker yellow, I'm adding some of this lighter yellow. Just touches up here, real small touches here and there. Don't want to draw the eye too much. And then I'm going to go even lighter. Dark, medium, and light gives you form, right? And with this sort of all over ambient light, I'm not worried too much about light direction. I'm just thinking more about the forms. So if I've got light, medium, and dark, then I'm happy. Up towards the front, smaller shapes as you go away, bigger shapes towards the front. And again, this is one of those things where be bold, give it a try. If it looks terrible, it's okay. You can just come back and add something else. I'm going to, just on some of these way up in the front, I think I'm going to add, let's do some alizarin and some green and a little bit of white. I don't want it too dark. I just want to add some centers too, just a couple of these, like right in the middle, in the foreground. Break that up, and then come back with yellow with white in it, because that plain yellow is, especially if you're working with the less expensive pigments, you might have a lot of trouble with your yellow not covering. And I always recommend, if you have to work with the cheaper pigments, at least go into a golden or a better brand for your white, because it'll mixing that white with the others will help you with your opacity. So just some of these right here. I want to get even more yellow, just right towards this center area. And a little more white. I love, love, love to teach, because I love it when people paint. I find painting to really give me a lot of joy. And we need that, don't we? These are just touches of even lighter yellow. Smaller and smaller shapes. Start with the big shapes and go to the smaller shapes. That's the way it works. Okay. And then I want to come in, just because it's fun, I'm going to pick a lighter green again. So that's my yellow. When I want a nice bright green, I'm going to use yellow and phthalo. Add some white for opacity. More yellow. I just love this kind of spring green yellow color. It's just like my happy color. I'll add some leaves. And I'm trying not to think leaf. It's very important not to name things. When you start naming things, you activate your left brain, you activate your linear brain. So it's, I tried to think, I need some flat green shapes in here, something to pop out that, instead of thinking about leaves. Think about what color, what value you need in a certain space. And I want this color in my liner brush, just to add some fuss. I'm going to add some fuss. Dotting and wiggling, and wherever I see some area that's looking flat, I'm going to do in this area anyway, because this is the area that I want to have the most detail. Dark against light, that's always effective. Light against dark, dark against light. Okay, that's pretty good. I think all my white is really dirty. I can't seem to get any really. When you're using white, remember, only this where you want the most attention, and only in the smallest amounts. Pure white, it can be very chalky, and it you only want to put it very judiciously. I'm going to put it in here where we got this. And I'm also going to go back and do another layer on my water. So that's a blue, and I added more white to it. I'm going to have to pause a second and get some more white, because my white is all dirty. You don't want dirty white. That's not good. Okay, so I want just a little bit of, what was I doing? Oh, I'm adding more white to the stream, lighter blue colors to the stream, to build up this area where it's barely touching the canvas, barely touching. I'm flipping my brush, and as you flip your brush over, you get I'm just going to get some, as you kind of flip and your brush and tap your brush, you'll get some variations. Okay, a little too much. I'm going to come back with blue. I just added some ultramarine to that blue I was using, which will be a more neutral blue. And so I'm softening out some of that. And you can also do this. Rinse your brush, dry it off. And we've got so many layers built up right now, you can actually just kind of erase it back. Scrubbing that in, because I want this just to kind of, and I do not want too much going on down at the bottom. Remember, we don't want that eye to come off. So I'm gonna darken this back up a little bit. I'm going to probably bring some green in there too. Just want that to kind of neutralize away there and bring more tension back up in here. And a lot of times you'll get with these rocks, so if I bring back in sort of a neutral color, let's take blue and red, a bit of white. You bring some of this dark back in to this area that's kind of cascading, because the water will, this isn't deep water, it's very shallow, and it's so it's going to show the bottom every once in a while. It's not going to be real deep. If it was deeper water, you wouldn't see that as much. So I'm adding all kinds of different colors in this area because it's the foreground. It's where I want attention. And you can play with this kind of thing for hours till you get the look that you want. But mostly what I'm looking for is, I don't know what I'm looking for, something that makes me happy. Let's see. I think I feel the need for something like that coming in. Let's see. Let's get another way to make neutral is purple and yellow. Complementary colors. Touch something dark. Just adding in a few darks back in some of these areas. Especially here around these yellow flower type shapes. Dark against light, that's gonna afford me a lot of interest right there. Just need some random darks in here. This area. I'm gonna leave that alone because I don't want it to draw a lot of attention. And those random darks, I'm going to bring in some green. So make some kind of green. Add a little more something going on. Settle those darks back in. Drip of water right there. Different shapes. Just adding interest in my foreground area. At this point, I tend to just look at my canvas and see what draws my eye. If an area draws my eye, and it shouldn't, because it's not an area that my eye should be drawn to, then I'm going to do something to it. Making something a little darker there for the bottoms of these greens. So in here, I just want some dark and light to create something. So I got some darker greens. Seeing a lot of canvas texture here and there, so wherever I see canvas texture that's drawing my eye, I'm going to get rid of that. And I can have this a little bit darker green in this area here, sort of mid area. If I see a shape that looks too funny. Got lots of different greens on my palette now, so I can just go back and forth with, well, some of them are dry, but let's get something a little greener. I'm quickly moving into the overdoing phase. What I'm doing here is just covering up these very light colors that are along the edge, because I don't want to draw the eye there. Bring these in a little bit. Some of our underpainting, but I don't want that real bright colors I'm bringing in the eye. And this little blob of, I don't want to do much over here, but it needs something to, so it doesn't just look like a pile of poop. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I'm going to leave that dry for a minute while I address the eagle's nest. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to, but it was also, I did want a little bit more layer of that gray blue on there, so we'll try it. No need to worry about messing things up in acrylics, because we can always just do it again. If need be, I can redo the whole sky. That's always good. That's always a lot of fun. Here, let me see if I can get something similar to what we had. Let's see, that's a little more blue than we had. Maybe, or maybe it's just because it was over. And it's too dark. Let me try this. I'm trying it over on the side of the canvas. Okay, so my issue there is just that I want to lighten this up a little bit. And I think I can just put some sky holes in there. I'm squinting my eyes down to do this so I can kind of see the shape. Okay, now I'm going to, I can see that I'm going to have to darken this a little bit in order to do this corner, but I'm all right with that because I don't need the red over there as strongly. Ooh, put some green in there. That's fun. Don't want to cover it all up, but I do want to fix the shape of that tree. I'm not unhappy with that anyway, because I kind of like the fact that this side is a little darker. Gives me a gradation across the sky. And again up here, kind of same thing, because I got some funky trees over here. Normally this would be really easy to reshape your trees because the sky would be more of a solid color, but because I had that bright underpainting, and then I brought this gray-blue over the top. It's a little more problematic because I don't want to lose all of that. But I do want to be able to make these trees a little less obviously. Okay, I think that will do it. Just blend that outward. I'm okay with that, almost. More white. More water. Got a little bit of a cloud going on there now. I'm okay with that. Just need to blend these. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is come in with my green. That's a little bit darkened. And restate the trees themselves. Back and forth, dark and light. These ones are a little more in the foreground, so I'm okay with them having a little bit more light on them. Soft, soft, soft. And not something a little darker. Same up here. Come back. Ooh, I can't leave trees without giving them a little bit of blue. Because, you know, in the shadows, the light bounces around and you get reflected light, right? And it's pretty. I like a little bit of blue in there. And a tiny bit of pure alizarin, because the alizarin makes the green pop. Creates interest. And then I can come back with my green. Oh, I have so many greens. Let's take this green, add some blue to it. Breaking up those shapes a little bit. So where I put blue, I'm not trying to cover it all up, but I'm just trying to make it a little more subtle. It's looking pretty good. This one down there is not looking subtle. Okay, let's see. I don't know. It's not looking too bad. I might add, going in with just a touch, of pure white. just a touch of pure white. I don't know, pretty happy with that. Thank you for joining me, and hope everybody is well and happy, and paint as much as you can because it makes the world a better place. All right, take care, you guys.